Hey, thanks. Actually, that's not what I ordered.
Yes, it is.
You might have noticed I just did a little bit of blaming. You know, the more I think about it, that's actually one of the biggest topics at work that stops teams from moving up their performance to the next level. People find it really easy to feel a little better about themselves by telling others how they're not doing things correct. So instead of owning performance issues themselves, you'll see people pointing their fingers. Now what happens? What's the old saying? When you're pointing your finger at somebody, you've got all these other fingers pointing right back at you. In fact, blame is so common as an obstacle for stopping better performance, I've made it into an acronym, and I share this with anyone who will listen because it helps stick in your brain what blame really is. It's just an acronym. It stands for barely legitimate, almost meaningless excuses. And if you'll think about it, that's what most blame really is. If you want to stop the blame game and move closer to having great conversations where people are owning their share of the performance, you've got to do at least 3 things. Number 1, and this is the most important, you have to call it for what it is when you see it. When you watch a colleague or find yourself engaging a little bit too much in what we might think of as blame, you have to call it and state it. Don't leave it unspoken. The more you do that, the more it's okay to continue blaming. That's number 1, call it. Number 2, own up publicly in the team context to your share of whatever the challenge is that you're facing. The problem, the conundrum, the negative thing, whatever it is, own your share. I don't care if you think that you're 5% or 10% responsible, own it. Number 1, call it for what it is, publicly name it. Number 2, own your share. Number 3, openly encourage others to do the same and make them own it. Now, I've seen this happen in practice many times. I'm thinking in particular about an example several years ago with an executive team at a firm who had some dynamics that really did need to move in some more positive directions. One of them was that they were overindulging in blame on a regular basis. In fact, I took some good notes after watching them and observing them. They were wasting upwards of 40% of their time in management meetings in subtle, articulate games of blame. I started applying these rules and asking them to apply these rules, and I had the president of the firm actually lead the effort. You know why? Because there was 2 people on that team, and this is not uncommon, you can relate to this, 2 people who really engaged a lot of blame activity every single management meeting. One in particular was a loud, extroverted bully. The other was a much more quiet, articulate plant engineer. These 2 were instrumental on the team. It was important that they get along, but they couldn't get past the bully using a heavy dose of blame, which racked up anywhere from 20 to 40% of time wasted every single meeting. So I told the president after one of the meetings where I observed him, I said, do you see this behavior that's going on? It's slightly bully-like. It's definitely about blame instead of owning performance. He said, yeah, I know what you're talking about. They've been doing that for years. That's just their personalities. That's the way they relate. I said, well, you got to understand that's not productive, and we need to kind of intervene in some way and get them to change that dynamic. He didn't really want to do it because no one likes to upset the apple cart and change the status quo, but I stayed after him until he agreed to do it. The next big management meeting rolls around, the team starts talking, and a few predictable performance-related issues pop up, which were always the catalysts for that bully to start blaming the plant engineer, and sure enough, he did. And I looked over at the president, and I gave him the evil wink, and he knew what I wanted him to do, and so he started following the rules, and he said, you know, guys, that sounds a little bit like a simple use of blame, and you know, we've been talking about this. That's not going to be a part of who we're becoming. It's not one of our norms. We're not going to blame anymore. So he asked the guy who's always getting picked on, hey, what do you really think? Usually you sit there quietly while this other gentleman blames the performance issue on you and your team out in the plant. What do you actually think about it? And the guy actually said, no, this is something I can talk about offline. We don't have to talk about this right here in the meeting. I gave the president another evil eye. And he said, no, it's important that we move past blame, that we own our part of the performance reality that we're facing. I want to know what you're thinking. And he finally spoke up and he said, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I can't believe that publicly this guy stabs me in the back on a regular basis. That's the opposite of what it means to be in a team. It's not the way we should operate. He had, in effect, punched the bully in the nose. Now, what happens when you punch a bully in the nose? The old saying is that they go away. Wrong. The bully gets mad. And in this case, and I knew this was going to happen, I was trying to orchestrate it, contain it, and help us learn from it. The bully got angry, and the 2 of them exploded into a very emotional conversation, but something great happened about 1 minute into that, and I knew it would because it usually happens. Others in the group, led by the president, intervened, started to see common ground, started helping everybody see what they had added to the the situation, what they had added to helping us find ourselves where we are in terms of our performance. And these two gentlemen, I watched this happen, it was really fun. These two gentlemen stopped throwing rocks at each other with words in every meeting and instead started joking about how they used to play the blame game. I gave them the acronym and they let the acronym become a joke. So let me give it to you one more time. BLAME really stands for barely legitimate, almost meaningless excuse. And once they had that fun, simple acronym, they used it. They laughed about it. They called blame publicly what it was when it started to emerge, because that's normal. It happens once in a while. And instead of overindulging in that type of behavior, they started, on average, owning their part in their team performance, and their performance increased as a result once they stopped playing the blame game.